I'm the deputy chairman of the state of Illinois Black Panther Party, Fred Hampton. And a lot of people don't understand the Black Panther Party's relationship with white mother country radicals. A lot of people don't even understand that word that Eric uses a lot. But what we're saying is that there are white people in the mother country that are for the same types of things that we are for stimulating revolution in the mother country. And we said that we'll work with anybody and form coalition with anybody that has revolution on their mind. We're not a racist organization because we understand that racism is an excuse used for capitalism. And we know that racism is a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people. And we're going to have to put it back in the hands of the people. Everybody in the state of Illinois is going to have to be involved or even around the revolution because we're going to have one. We're going to have to do more than talk. We're going to have to do more than listen. We're going to even have to do more than learn. We're going to have to start practicing, and that's very hard. We're going to have to start learning, and you learn through practice. We got to start making mistakes, and you learn through making mistakes. We got to start getting out there with the people. And a lot of times we think we're better than the people, but that's an insult and that's criminal. Think you're better than the people. So we got to get together and learn where it's at. It's going to take a lot of hard work. That breakfast for children is something else. You ought to dig on it. Every sister in this audience. Now, every sister in this audience ought to get themselves together and come on down and help us with that breakfast for children program. You ought to come down and help feed them children in the morning. We have breakfast for children because we teach the people through practice, through observation and participation, that people can be fed free. That's the people thing. Socialism is the people. You're afraid of yourself. If you're afraid of socialism, you're afraid of yourself. We know they have our pictures. We know they're looking for us. We know they want us. But we're still saying that even though we could be in a sense, as far as this system goes, on the mountaintop, we in the Black Panther Party, because of our dedication and understanding what's in the valley, knowing that the people in the valley, knowing that we originally came from the valley, knowing that our flag is the same flag as the people in the valley, knowing that our enemy is on the mountaintop, our friends are in the valley, we say even though it's nice to be on the mountaintop, we're going back to the valley. I be in the office every day. I be in the streets propagandizing every day. I be working with everybody every day. I be teaching that solidarity is the thing. The end of a complete wipeout of imperialism is the thing. So if you're going to be thinking about me, that's what Bobby would be teaching. If you're going to be thinking about us, all we say is ain't no thing about going nowhere, getting killed. All we want to know is that you're doing what we'd be doing if we were here. And you got to do that. You can't do it unless you believe that you can do it. In the spirit of liberation, we understand that they want everybody in the party in jail. And we know that if we try to figure out and separate and divide who should go and who shouldn't go, we spend more time doing that than working for the people. So the quick solution, the speedy one, nobody goes. Nobody goes. We all stay right here. With the people. Because we love the people. Okay, you can put your hands down now. We say all power to all people. We say white power to white people. Brown power to brown people. Yellow power to yellow people. Black power to black people. X power to those that we left out. We say Panther power to the Vanguard Party. When you leave here saying the last word, before you go to bed tonight, say I am a revolutionary. Make that the last word. In case you don't wake up, then somebody might believe it and you might, end up in what they call a revolutionary happy hunting ground. Say that. I am a revolutionary. Say it when you're going out. Everybody, leave. Okay, we're going to say it while we're going out. And We been starting a thing called Free Fred. Don't that sound nice? Hey, let's do that. Free Fred. Free Fred. Free Fred. Free Fred. Hey, I ain't even in jail yet.
You basically knowing my ideology, and basically you knowing me knowing yours, you can, is that what you're saying?
Why not?
And you believe in programs like the Breakfast for Children program and free health clinics? Right on, brothers?
We believe they're good things.
Uh-huh.
As a focal point to organize their mothers and fathers.
Uh-huh.
Peace.
Mm-hmm. There's no educational program here?
That's come out of the social action thing. You know, you set that up, but I mean, we can't put everything on one piece of paper.
What about this bank?
Credit union?
Mm-hmm.
Credit union. Credit union, my brother.
Is a bank.
Are you hip to credit unions? It is a bank.
Yeah, you go and borrow money?
Yeah, it's a bank. It's a bank. Owned by the people. Run for the people. And by the people.
Mm-hmm. What will money be given out to people for?
Well, the people would decide that.
You want to buy?
You know, whatever, you know, the people in the community decide. You need some living room furniture, maybe? You need a car, maybe?
See, the thing is with me, you dig, I need to know some more about it. I wish you had some more literature about the educational thing here. Because, you dig, as far as we're concerned in the struggle, the way we look at struggle is that this depends on the educational thing, you dig. Because
this depends on the education. Well, the whole thing.
No, but in the end, this does. You can form this with no education. You can form this and this.
No, not the way we're talking about forming it. You know, right. We're talking about forming it right. You know, it's not on the paper. We didn't write it on the paper.
You form it right with no education.
No.
Let me give you an example. Jomo Kenyatta formed the excellent revolution with no education. And on the day of the end thing, Jomo told the motherfucker, said, well, you know, you can educate, hate the enemy, but I'm your brother. I'll help you lead the revolution. Now I'm going to oppress you. Another example, Papa Doc in Haiti. Papa Doc in Haiti hated everything white. Man, you couldn't put this white paper in front of Papa Doc's face. But he moved all the white people out and he took over and be oppressed. He did, because of no education. And the people that have been educated, they just said that we don't hate the motherfucker white people, we hate the oppressor, whether he be white, black, brown, or yellow. So we got to know the educational program to find out what is going to be in the finale. A lot of people, Jomo Kenyatta is called not never a revolutionary, but an ex-revolutionary. So is Papa Doc. They brought on a successful revolution. That thing in the Mao's was a bitch. Bantu freedom fighters, all that kind of action. But what we're saying is the end. That you don't judge Castro now. You can't do it. Nobody in this room could judge whether Castro's going to be a revolutionary or not. You know what I mean? We're talking about things, you know what I mean, with China, the People's Republic, and even at the stage they're in now, talking about even going on further into a communistic state. That's what we're talking about. Those are revolutionary. So we got to understand here the educational program that you have to be able to figure out whether it will go on the right lines where the people will end up in a situation where they can be able to really control themselves. You understand what I'm saying? With no education, the people take this local foundation and start stealing money because they won't be really educated to why it's the people's thing anyway. You understand what I'm saying? With no education, you have neo-colonialism instead of colonialism, like you got in Africa now, like you got in Haiti. So what we're talking about is there has to be an educational program. That's very important. As a matter of fact, it's so important for us that a person has to go through 6 weeks of our political education before he can consider himself a member of the party, able to even run down ideology for the party. Why? Because if they don't have an education, then they're nowhere. You dig what I'm saying? They're nowhere because they don't even know why they're doing what they're doing. You might get people caught up in the emotionalist movement. You understand me? You might get them caught up in because they're poor and they want something. And then if they're not educated, they want more. And before you know it, they'll be capitalists. And before you know it, we'll have Negro imperialists.
Museum, and welcome to American Black Journal. Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So let's go back 50 years to that time when the Black Panther Party started. Talk to me about what was going on, what the mood was like, and what the aim was of starting this movement.
Well, one of the things that's very parallel is that there were a lot of murders of young black men who were unarmed, who were innocent, by police. In particular, one that kind of got the Black Panther Party started was a young man named Denzel Dowell, who was running away, shot in the back. And his mother got in touch with the Panthers. She said, no one will help us. No one will do anything. And they went out, and the first issue of the Black Panther newspaper was, why was Denzel Dowell killed?
Right.
So there's been, I would say, thousands of Denzel Dowell killings, Denzel Dowell-like killings since that. But that's what provoked the start. The Black Panther Party for Self-Defense was the name of the organization in California where it started. It started shortly after Stokely Carmichael, who was the chair of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee at that time, called for Black Power. It was, even Stokely said, the first organization organized around Black Power.
Right.
We want power to determine the destiny of our own black community. So it was a group of young men and women. It started out with actually two, and then there was three: Bobby Seale, Huey Newton, and then Bobby Hutton, who was a teenager. Bobby was a veteran, Huey Newton was a law student, and Bobby Hutton was a high school kid. This is the beginning of the Black Panther Party. It had a platform, 10 points, and it had a goal, and it took off probably because this issue was so vicious. Yeah. So many people were being killed, and in particular because the state of California allowed the open carrying of weapons in public. And so the Panthers were doing nothing illegal. They were fish and game laws.
By carrying weapons,
it was
which
completely
is a
legal.
sort of iconic image of the Panthers, right?
Well, this was legal. This was for the hunters. So when the Panthers, as a political movement, became publicly armed, they decided, the state legislature decided they want to change the law,
Yeah.
and the Panthers sent a delegation, an armed delegation, to the state capitol to observe the legislation, and that hit the papers, partially because no one had ever been to the state capitol. They didn't know where to go, right. And the press was so stunned to see them, they pointed them in the wrong direction. They sent them to the floor of the state assembly, not to the visitors gallery.
Right.
How would they know?
Right.
So pandemonium broke loose. It was in all the papers, all over the country, and people saw black teenage men, black older men, black women armed in the state capitol. Blew everybody's mind.
Lots of people will say that is the point at which Ronald Reagan, who was the governor of California at that time, at the point at which he changed his mind even about open carry and gun control, that having been an open carry advocate up to that point, seeing these African Americans carrying weapons in the California Capitol in public changed his mind. I mean, it's one of those dynamics we see very often in American politics, where if African Americans do something, it makes people think a little differently.
He was there. Bobby Seale said, well, we go to the state capitol, the press is always there. In fact, Ronald Reagan was having a press conference when the Panthers showed up. They just showed up, and the press left Reagan and came and talked to the Panthers. So he didn't seem to gain any insight into the need for self-defense or the need to end police brutality.
Right.
That wasn't his thing. Anyway, the Black Panther Party blew up, not as an organization, but as an image. All over the country, people saw it. All over the world, people saw it. And I would say it was a hit, particularly with people who are targets of police brutality. So there were chapters in Oakland and San Francisco, then LA, then across the West Coast, then across the country to New York. So the party just exploded. Part of the reason it exploded is because Huey Newton, after the visit to Sacramento, Huey Newton, who was the chair, ended up in a shooting confrontation with an Oakland policeman. Now, there are lots of shooting confrontations with police in the 60s. This is the Vietnam War. Right. There's a lot of shooting going on a lot of places. People are coming back from Vietnam, refusing to go to Vietnam. There's a lot of shooting going on. In this particular shooting, something happened that rarely happened. Most of the incidents, policemen shoot someone who's young and black, and they say it's justifiable homicide, period. In this instance, police shot at Huey Newton. He shot back, and guess what? He survived, and John Fry died.
Yeah.
So it's been all over the news that leader of the Black Panther Party for self-defense survived, and John
Killed the
Fry
cop.
is dead. The police went berserk. The Panthers hit the news, and the rest, you might say, is history. But this issue of police violence, police brutality against black youth, particularly black men, is what started the Black Panther Party.
Right.
And guess what? Here it comes
Well,
full-fledged again.
let's talk about how you, as someone who was there 50 years ago to see the beginning of the party, for that reason, now 50 years later, watching as the Black Lives Matter movement unfolds around the same issue, the very same issue. What does that tell you about?
Well, I'm very surprised that people are comparing or talking about Black Lives Matter and the Black Panthers. There's some very fundamental
different, right?
differences. First of all, Black Lives Matter was started by 3 women. Black Panther Party was started by 2 men. One's a veteran, one's a law student. The Black Lives Matter is taking a pledge of nonviolence. The Black Panther Party said, we're for self-defense.
Right.
The Black Panther Party looked at the Nation of Islam and how they had a 10-point platform and program, 10 points, what we want, what we believe. They said, well, we like that motto, but we won't have those goals. So we had a 10-point platform, what we want, what we believe. Point 1, we want power to determine the destiny of our own black community.
Yeah.
It was a focus, it was really a movement for liberation of black people as a community.
Right.
Not merely to stop the police from killing us, but to change the economics, change the politics, change the dynamics, particularly focusing on police violence and the massive imprisonment of black people. Now, this is in the middle of the Vietnam War.
Right, and in the middle of the civil rights movement. I mean, there's a lot of change going on at the time. I think a lot of people believed that change would change things socially, so that African Americans wouldn't be in the conditions that there are. Does it surprise you at all that Black Lives Matter unfolds today? Sort of.
I should have been here sooner. You know, it's not, Black Lives have mattered for a long time.
Yeah.
No, what I'm getting at is the fact that the Black Panther Party was so viciously destroyed during the Vietnam War. One of the films about the party, there's a man who's actually a former CIA agent, says, well, they're killing people in Vietnam, and then they start killing them here. I mean, so the Panthers were put out of business by arrests, by murders, and by intrigue on the part of the government in a warlike manner. Yeah. At one point, after Nixon was elected president, there was a shootout, an attack, a raid every week on the Black Panther Party. It culminated in 1969. 4 days after the murder of the chairman of the Black Panther Party in Chicago, in his sleep, there was a raid by the LAPD on the Black Panther office in Los Angeles, and they figured they're going to mop these people up. Guess what? It was a 5-hour shootout, and the police never took the office, and no one was killed. So that was sort of the point at which they said, okay, let's get rid of them 100%. I was out of the country by that time, and so the Black Panther Party was engaged in a war with the state, and, well, I should say the state. The police took an issue to take war against the Black Panther Party. Right. Black Lives Matter is a peace-loving organization modeled on the principles of Ella Baker, who was sort of the spirit guiding the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which was an earlier organization with a more spiritual and more socially acceptable position. Why people want to connect them to the Black Panthers is not clear to me. I think what the connection is the social context of violence,
right,
of murder, of killing young black men.
It's the same thing that's inspiring both movements. Talk briefly about the difference between political change and legal change, which we did see come out of the 60s to some degree, and social change. I see them as different things, and I suspect that from the perspective of the Black Panthers, they were different too.
Well, social change is something people do. Legal change is something done in the state assembly. Legal change may or may not have any social impact. They can change the law if people don't obey the law. I believe it probably is illegal for police to murder black people.
It
A
is.
murder generally is illegal.
Right.
It's almost never, ever, ever considered murder. I remember reading a story about a policeman in New York a few days ago. He was actually convicted because he shot in a stairwell at a project and bullet ricocheted and killed someone. So he contributed to his death. The change in how the violence of police is being interpreted is long overdue. There's a trail of bloodshed and broken families and broken hearts and broken communities behind this that's intolerable.
Yeah.
So the social change is, I believe, that there's a recognition and a broader element of society that what the police are doing is wrong, that what the police are doing is illegal. And there have actually been some cases in which police are indicted. Now, the culture of the police, I don't know whether they're getting it, but clearly it's not as acceptable now as it was 50 years ago to murder black people in the street.
Sure, sure. And of course, here in Detroit in 1967, we have unrest, riots, civil disorder as a result of a police killing. Talk about the relationship between the police and the black community then, in the 60s, and now. Do you see it as different in any way?
I wish I could see it as different. It seems that the black community was more compact and more able to respond vigorously to this level of violence than now. We had more families, more working men, and our communities were more intact,
sure.
And we had black communities. Now we have a lot of devastation. The post, crack era, the post mass imprisonment era, decline in education, decline in health. The black community is extraordinarily suffering, extraordinary damages that were not present in the 60s. But the police seem to be imposing the same type of negative, hostile, violent retaliation. They seem to seek out innocent, unarmed people to shoot at.
Right.
This is very racist. This is very, in my opinion, it's criminal. But what I notice is different is there's a larger outcry from the public in general and even from the Justice Department.
Sure.
And from citizens against this than
there's
there
a consciousness about it being
wrong.
unacceptable.
It's wrong.
Yeah.
It's murder.
Right.
I mean, I don't know how the difference, I think, at that time was that the United States was involved in a massive war in Vietnam. And so one commenter in a film says, well, they're killing people in Vietnam, so they'll just be killing them here. There were people coming to Vietnam, going back in Vietnam.
Right.
There were men who would say, well, if I'm going to die, why should I go to Vietnam? I'll just die right here.
You can die in the streets.
So
right.
There was a sense of warfare that was widespread. I don't think that's the same sense now. So it seems to be socially repulsive that this kind of perpetual attack. I mean, the one that's so revolting is Tamir Rice. He's
Sure.
a child.
12-year-old.
He's a child.
Yeah.
What kind of policeman goes around shooting a child? Or what kind of person does that? So, this is socially unacceptable.
Right. Let's talk briefly about the role of women in the Black Panther Party. As you point out, it's founded by 3 men, and yet two men, and they're joined later by Bobby Seale, correct?
No, I'm sorry. Bobby Seale is the chairman who founded it.
Right.
Huey Newton was a law student. They were friends from Merritt College. The two of them planned it. Actually, Bobby Seale's wife typed out the 10-point platform and program on his birthday, October 21st, 1966. And Bobby Hutton joined later.
Yeah.
That's not surprising if you consider the 60s and what people expected an armed organization to be. Bobby Seale was a veteran. They didn't have too many women veterans.
Right.
Huey Newton was a law student. There weren't that many women law students. So this is not particularly unusual. 50 years later.
But you play a really significant role in the party then.
When I came into the Black Panther Party, I had already met Eldridge Cleaver. I was in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in Atlanta, Georgia. He was in California. He called me and said, you've got to come out here and help us. Huey Newton is shot. Bobby Seale was already serving time for the visit to Sacramento with the armed delegation. The party was in shambles. There were about 5 people. And Eldridge Cleaver, who was the adult in the room, and he was facing a murder charge. He said, "You've got to come out here and help us." So I came out to help, and we were able to get it rolling and get a movement around his case. And by the time it went to trial, there was 5,000 people around the courthouse. But this is because I was already in a movement, and we were in love with each other. So it didn't take much to get me to move to California.
Right.
Many people came out after that. You know, there were people who were in jail. They got out. By the time Bobby Seale got out, we had demonstrations around the courthouse. The party reassembled in another format. It was started Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. It came into Black Panther Party. The role of women expanded tremendously. The popularity expanded tremendously. The Free Huey movement caught on internationally and domestically. And so it was a time of tremendous conflict and tremendous hostility to the government of the United States because of Vietnam.
Right.
People could see this is wrong. The French, who had fought 2 wars in Vietnam, suggested to America, this is not something to do.
You can't.
The Americans didn't get it. But guess what? The Vietnamese beat them too.
Right.
So since then, it's been a very different kind of country in the sense that the United States, my son asked me when he was in 3rd grade, who won the Vietnam War? They don't teach them in school.
Very interesting question.
Very
right?
good question.
Yeah.
Well, it's pretty obvious who won, but not to the Americans.
Right.
So that era is gone. Here we are in another era. America is, you might say, not the world's most dominant power. It is the dominant economy, but there's a lot of other challenges. So it's not a Soviet Union, United States, 2 big guys,
Right.
and everybody else has to.
We've disrupted the sort of bipolar
It's gone.
power dynamic.
It's gone.
Yeah. But still in all, you see women in much more prominent roles in Black Lives Matter, as you point out.
Women started Black Lives Matter.
Right.
A woman actually helped start SNCC, Ella Baker. Ella Baker is the model that the 3 women who started Black Lives Matter are following.
Sure.
I believe the model that generated the Black Panther Party was really Malcolm X and also, to some extent, Ho Chi Minh. It was not a woman's model. It was a sort of a warrior model. It attracted many women. Many women are warriors. This is not a secret, but it's not part of the image that is cultivated in this society. So the time was different. It was a time of war. This is not a time of international war, although the war's all over, but it's really much more of a domestic war, and it is a different approach to this problem of police violence, a community-based approach, nonviolent, peaceful, more spiritual approach than was that adopted by the Black Panthers.
Sure. I'm curious how you see the issue of Black power and Black progress today and how they might intertwine. And I'll give you an example. We have an African-American president for the first time in history. In some ways, that's a form of power available to an African-American that wouldn't have been available before. It's a sign of progress. At the same time, you see Black people in communities all over the country suffering, as you said before, from the same conditions that they had suffered from in the 60s and, of course, for centuries before. Talk about how those 2 things in your mind work together, and are they a sign of us heading in the right direction? Maybe not fast
we're not
enough?
heading in the right direction.
Okay.
The country is going too rapidly into a fascist mode. There's too much police violence. There's too much economic discrimination. There's too much racism. There's too much hatred, and the school systems are falling apart. They say it's public knowledge. The health of the American population is declining.
Sure.
This is a generation that's not going to live longer than their parents. What's going on? This is something very, very disturbing, very distressing. If that's the general situation, what is the situation among Black people?
Right.
Among Black people, you see several layers of change. Some people are way better off, like the Obamas.
Right.
Other people are much worse off, the kind who have everybody gone to prison. So the class distinctions and class gradations among blacks and whites are more vicious. The opportunities are less. There was a time when you could be pretty sure if you got a good grades in high school, you could find a college that would accept you, you could get a scholarship.
Right.
Those days are over.
Yeah.
The
So
economy is collapsing.
What's the solution then? I mean, if the solution,
Well, it sounds to me that everything needs a very dramatic change. This is what the Black Panthers were for, very dramatic change. We had platform and program change in the manner of policing, in the manner of prison, in the economy, in the educational system. That's called revolutionary change.
Right.
Well, the opposition to revolutionary change, engineered by J. Edgar Hoover and Richard Nixon and that crew, was pretty vicious.
Sure.
It was a war. They just shot us all up and shut down our offices and denounced us and called us all kind of names. Those problems that we were challenging not only are still here, they are worse. Where are the solutions that the side that destroyed us? What are their solutions?
Yeah.
Well,
Right.
we need a very profound transformation in our politics, in our social orientation, recognition, not just that Black Lives Matter, recognition that this society is going down the tubes,
Right.
that you're diminishing the opportunities of everyone. Now, at the same time, you see things that never happened before. A black man became the Attorney General of the United States. This is stunning.
Yes.
That's, to me, it's even more stunning than that there's a black president. Right. It's more important in a certain sense because this is the chief law enforcement officer
Absolutely.
of the United States, and now it's a black woman. So I'm very stunned. I'm amazed. A black first lady who's a beautiful black
Right.
woman. I love that. I mean, it's like a movie. But those are top level changes.
Right.
What's going on the ground? What happens to little kids who go to first grade? What happens? The health is horrible. Also, there's, how would I say, a large change in the black community. There's a lot of black people now in America who weren't from here. There's people coming from Africa,
sure.
people coming from the Caribbean. Guess what? When I teach, some of my best students came from Africa. They came from another culture. They're black, but their educational system and their educational focus is a little different. And guess what? The big major universities have noticed this difference. And so they want a certain black population, but they prefer a population that is not as troublesome and not as poorly educated as the indigenous black population. So we are being, what do you call it, displaced.
Sort of pushed aside yet again. Yeah. So again, do you see the seeds of that kind of social change in America today? The kind of social change that the Black Panthers were about and trying.
No, it's the
bring
opposite.
about?
The kind of change that's coming out is the opposite of the kind that we wanted. That we wanted power to determine the destiny of our own black community. I don't see any of that. We wanted an immediate end to police brutality. I don't see too much of that. Yeah. So the society is becoming, to use a big, scary word, more fascist, less democratic, more layered, less egalitarian. Rich people at the top and a whole bunch of people who aren't rich all the way down. More concentrated wealth, more widely distributed poverty. These are bad signs. It's very, very bad for democracy. Yeah. Well, in fact, I don't see a lot of democracy.
Yeah. Okay. Kathleen Cleaver, thank you for being here on American Black Journal and
thank
at
you.
the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Latino, latino, echemos siempre pa'lante, abrázate a tu destino. Latino, 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 echemos siempre pa'lante, abrázate a tu destino. Latino, latino, haz bien a la humanidad, hazle bien a tu vecino. Yo te aseguro, latino, la puerta se te abrirá.
During the 1960s and 70s, young Puerto Ricans organized for the empowerment of their communities across the United States. Among the organizations organizations that emerged were the Movement for Independence, El Comité, the Puerto Rican Student Union, and the Young Lords.
On the whole, we were first-generation Puerto Ricans born and or raised in this country. And we found as we started going out into the world that society was a very white society.
And the conditions in the community at that time were dire. There were a lot of drugs. The housing was abominable. The health care was non-existent.
It was a struggle as I was growing up in this city. And I saw a lot in the communities, and I saw the system in this community not helping any of the people that I relate to every day. I joined the Young Lords out of anger.
We all had a tremendous sense that our people did not deserve the kind of situation and the kind of condition that we were living under. That our parents had worked just as hard as anyone else to make a better life for us, and for some reason we weren't succeeding. And so we had that commitment that we were going to change things, and it didn't matter what had to be done, but that we were going to change things.
One had said, if we really were about revolution, that we have to ask the people what they wanted. And so we went on 110th Street, and we actually asked the people, what do you think you need? What do you need? Is it housing? Is it police brutality? And I said, muchacho, déjate de todo eso, la basura. And I thought, my God, all this romance, all this ideology to pick up garbage. But that's what they wanted.
So we started sweeping the streets, and we piled all the garbage in, and we put it in bags, and we left. And the next Sunday we came back, and the streets were dirty again, and we swept them up again. And we did this for 3 Sundays. And on the 3rd Sunday, more and more people started joining, and we soon didn't have enough brooms. So we went down to the sanitation department, and we told them, look, we're sweeping the street, we want some brooms. We'll bring them back, we just want to sweep. The guy said, no, you can't have them. You know, we just can't give you brooms.
The people couldn't believe that I could go up to this Italian guy and say, we want the brooms. And he said, no. I said, well, we're going to take them. And I pushed them aside, grabbed the brooms, grabbed some baggage, some bags, and we literally took the brooms.
But this time, because for the last 2 weeks, the garbage hadn't been picked up by the sanitation department, we took all the trash and all the bags, we put them all in the middle of 3rd Avenue, we blocked the traffic on 3rd Avenue.
Knowing full well that the buses could not move. If the buses couldn't move, it simply meant that money was not being made, and we would get the garbage picked up. We knew it was a short-lived victory, but the people loved to see it, and they loved to see us getting away.
We then branched out, not just on 110th Street, we went to 111th and 112th and 113th and over to Madison. And the next Sunday, all the streets were being blocked, and before you knew it, some people started setting fire to the trash in the middle of the streets. The fire trucks came, the trash trucks came, and that became known as the first East Harlem garbage protest. As people saw us doing this, more people wanted to join the organization.
Most of the people were enthusiastic because I think that they saw there was a need for social change, and they saw that there was somebody doing something about it.
There wasn't very much information on Puerto Rican history, Puerto Rican culture. We started, I would say as a group, to begin to explore our history and our identity.
We're a mix of 3 great cultures. The Indian culture, the Taino group, the African culture representing many different countries in Africa, and also the European presence, the Spanish presence. Those 3 groups are part of what contributed to our looks, our hair, our color, our music, our songs, our foods, and also our deepest beliefs.
Once we started to understand that, why we had so many different colors in our families, facial characteristics, hair textures, and came to peace with ourselves and said, yo, that's who we are. We are multiracial people.
The struggle for identity dates back to the 1800s, when the colony of Puerto Rico fought for independence from Spain. The revolt in the town of Lares in 1868 is remembered as the Grito de Lares, and the flag is a symbol of the independence struggle. But Puerto Rico remained a Spanish colony until 1898. Using the sinking of the battleship Maine as a pretext, the United States embarked on a war against Spain.
Spain itself wasn't invaded, but the Americans landed in Guanica on the southern coast of Puerto Rico on July 25, 1898. Many of the people were happy to see the Americans because they thought that their situation under Spain had been so terrible. But many also expected to be able to be free and independent. But the United States imposed a military regime in Puerto Rico.
The United States takes the island as a prize of war and then moves to transform the economy of the island in favor of the American corporations who want to use the land. In order to use the land, they've got to rip it off from the Puerto Rican people who live on the land as subsistence farmers.
The economic situation in Puerto Rico got worse and worse the longer the Americans stayed there. The crisis of the 1930s was a worldwide economic crisis. Things were very bad in the United States. In Puerto Rico, they were much worse. People were earning 6 cents an hour. Many people had bad nutrition, were poorly housed, very poor school system. So lots of Puerto Ricans came to the United States desperate to change their situation. The 10-year period after World War II, between 1948 and 1958, some 53,000 Puerto Ricans a year left the island of Puerto Rico and came mainly to New York City.
Puerto Ricans arrived as United States citizens, yet they were subjected to racial, cultural, and language discrimination, as well as economic exploitation. The oppressive social reality was the basis for the political revolt that would follow. Inspired by world events and their experiences in the civil rights, anti-war, and student movements, Latinos responded with direct action and political organization.
I was one of the original 5 or 6 people in New York City that started the Sociedad del Viso Campos that eventually became the Young Lords Organization and then the Young Lords Party.
The Sociedad had been meeting since the winter of 68-69 to try to form some kind of a political group for Puerto Ricans.
Around about that time, the Panthers were in existence in New York, and we were all reading the Black Panther paper. We were sort of fascinated with what they were doing. In that issue of the Panther paper was a very interesting article about this group of Puerto Ricans in Chicago, the Young Lords.
The Chicago Young Lords pressured institutions to respond to concerns of the surrounding Latino community. Led by Chacha Jimenez, they occupied a local church in the fall of 1968.
Well, we were starting opening up a daycare center for welfare mothers, mothers that are on welfare that want to work, or just mothers whether they're on welfare or not and want to work, something like that. So we take care of the children. We go out. We're planning to go out in the morning and pick them up, because in winter time, snowing that, take them back.
Did you ask the pastor of the church if you could use his church for this purpose?
We've talked. The pastor of the church is really in favor of us. He's a sympathizer. It's just board members that are not really, half of the board members are not really for us.
Luis, are you planning on taking over other organizations in this area?
Only when they need to be.
We believe in an equal share of the government. It's sort of like socialism. This is what we believe in. People are entitled to their beliefs. People are entitled to work for what they believe in. This is part of the Constitution states it clearly,
What would you do if the church board called in the police to throw your group out?
I guess we'll go to jail. I don't know what'll happen. We'll probably go to jail.
You wouldn't leave if the police showed up?
I don't think so. I don't think we'll leave. We're a poor organization who works for poor people, and we're trying to speak out and let the world know what poor people want.
In New York, young Latinos were inspired by the Chicago Young Lords.
And a decision was made by some of the guys to hop in a car and drive to Chicago and go and meet Cha-Cha. And when they got back from Chicago, they were very excited. They had met Cha-Cha, they were very impressed with him, and they had made an agreement to start an East Coast branch of the Young Lords organization at that time.
The organization followed a military structure.
We then chose a central committee of 5 people, which at that time was Felipe Luciano as chairman, Pablo Guzman as the Minister of Information, myself as the Minister of Education, David Perez as the Minister of Defense, and Juan F. Ortiz as the Minister of Finance. To me, the most amazing thing about everything that happened afterwards is that a group of young people, young Puerto Ricans, could have the kind of impact and affect the kind of changes that were done in the city. I think speaks, one, to the tremendous potential that any young people have once they decide to do something. At a certain point, after the Young Lords had developed and we were beginning to become known, Pablo started saying, we need a program.
We needed to have something that we could constantly refer to, a point of reference, not only for the people out there that we were organizing around, but for ourselves.
The 13-point program was written. It called for self-determination, an end to racism, community control of institutions, armed self-defense, and a socialist society.
And we would conduct weekly political education classes, especially around the 13-point program. Then when Young Lords would go out to speak someplace, when people would ask them what our organization was about, they would start explaining the different points of our program.
The Young Lords membership was mainly Puerto Rican. African Americans, Cubans, Dominicans, Mexicans, and other Latinos also joined. They were workers, students, unemployed youth, and Vietnam War veterans.
My name is Sonia Ivany, and I'm very happy to say I was the first woman in the Young Lords Party. And I was a student at the time at New York University and went to the first meeting, which was an all-male meeting in May. I think it was a meaningful experience for women to be involved at that level in political activities and in the political process. And although I had a 3-month-old baby, it didn't stop me from participating.
Montaña, montaña mía, montaña mía, tan altiva y tan tallada.
My name is Tony Rosa. I was born in Aguadilla, Puerto Rico, and I got raised up in 138th Street and Brook Avenue in the South Bronx. When I was in the Young Lords, my main thing was to deal with party security and making sure that most of our people were safe.
My name is Diana Caballero, and I think that that whole era represented for me a turning point in terms of who I was. You know, it was a period of definition as a Puerto Rican, doing work in the community and education and with political prisoners, Puerto Rican political prisoners.
I had always felt really comfortable in El Barrio. I sort of fit in. Many of the people that I grew up with as kids made the assumption that I was Puerto Rican, but I wasn't. But that core group of people who formed the Young Lords were not all Puerto Rican. And I think that that's something that's really important and something that's very different about the Young Lords. It was not locked into a very tight cultural definition of who you had to be a Young Lord.
And I think what held us together was that we understood the importance of collective action.
The Young Lords expanded their activities to provide free breakfast programs and free clothing drives. Through Serve the People programs, they developed a strong relationship with the community.
We went very innocently looking for space for our breakfast programs and some of our other programs that were beginning to expand, and we needed more space, and there was this building that was empty pretty much most of the time in El Barrio, and we just went knocking on the door and saying, excuse me, I mean, and we figured it's a church, you know, and they're going to, you know, greet us with open arms. Felipe found out that there was a Sunday coming up that was a testimonial Sunday, and knowing how this worked in these churches, in Protestant churches, he knew that anybody could get up and testify.
When I stood up to speak and asked them why they refused, I went to the front of the altar. I remember women trying to hit me with candelabras. One guy who we now know was an agent pulled the plug off the organ. They were playing Onward Christian Soldiers. And as they were playing Onward Christian Soldiers, 6 policemen beat me from the front of the altar all the way to the end. I remember I was slipping on my own blood. 13 of us, I think, were arrested, handcuffed, and thrown into police cars. The police don't know this, but at that point, we already knew that we had won. We literally kidnapped the church.
Now we want to make it very clear once again why the Young Lords have occupied the church. One, the First Spanish Methodist Church is empty 6 days a week. Two, it has the largest space available for community service programs. Let it be understood that we never asked, and these are the myths that must be destroyed right now, we never asked to take over the institution. We never asked to control the church. We only asked for cooperation in terms of running a breakfast program for needy children. We'd like to make it very clear, however, that this is going to happen to any institution in any oppressed community that does not respond to the needs of the people.
I heard about a group that was in a church that were trying to use this church, this Christian church, to serve the people, and that the police had come in and beat up this group. And I said to myself, church, a group that's trying to serve the people, I've got to go and find out what's going on. And that's how I became a Young Lord.
My father was very involved in politics, and he had taken me to an activity that the Young Lords was initiating up in El Barrio, and it was the People's Church. And I walked in, and I felt like I was home. I felt like this was, it was very gripping. It felt like that was really where I wanted to be, that's where I belonged, that the struggle, that the concerns that I saw that all these people had about equal rights and really making a difference in the world and standing up for what they believe and being really committed to that moved me so. It moved everything that I felt that I was about at that time.
There were activities at the church. People came, there were speakers, there were reverends. I mean, I had never seen anything like this. And it just blew my mind. And I felt like, I said, whoa, this is it. This is what I've been looking for. And I listened very carefully to what everyone was saying. And went home, I caucused with my crowd of friends, and they said, you're crazy. You know what you're getting yourself into? I said, no, you have to be there. You have to see this.
After an 11-day occupation, 105 Young Lords and supporters were arrested. Despite the arrests, the Young Lords continued their programs at other community spaces. In May 1970, the Young Lords organization became the Young Lords Party and began to publish a bilingual newspaper. They called it Pa'lante, meaning forward in struggle.
We had never put out a newspaper before, so like everything else that about the organization, it was, we learned by doing.
So one of the first jobs I had was working on the paper, doing the layout and some of the editing.
I began working with Denise, putting out the newspaper, putting out Pa'lante, and selling newspapers, because at that time you had like an apprenticeship. But it was a test about people who were serious about doing things more than just promoting themselves, and actually serving the community and giving something of yourself for the community.
Latinos in other cities heard about the Young Lords and connected with the New York chapter to establish local branches in Hoboken, Newark, Jersey City, Bridgeport, New Haven, Boston, and Philadelphia.
In Philadelphia, one of the most outstanding things that we had to address was the question of racism. At that time, Rizzo, who is known to be a right-wing conservative racist, was the police commissioner and later became the mayor. And so the amount of police brutality that was not only affecting the Puerto Rican community, but the black community as well, was astounding. So we did a lot of work basically trying to bridge the different communities together, because the amount of separation and segregation, again, the question of divide and conquer, was so clearly evident.
We weren't just making a revolution in the external society. We were making a revolution in ourselves. We had all read a pamphlet that was very famous at that time by Che Guevara called Man and Socialism, where he talked about how the fight to make a new society is also the fight to make a new individual.
But we suffered from all of the problems that exist in contemporary society between the sexes, the male chauvinism, the sexism, was amplified when you become a paramilitary organization. And the combination of factors made life rather miserable for the women in the organization for a period of time.
We managed to get women's caucus, and so every Sunday, the women of the organization would meet. After meeting for several months, we decided to come up with a list of about 10 demands that we wanted to present to the Central Committee that at that point was all male.
And they were not requests, they were demands. One of the demands was that the program and platform of the Lords be changed, because there was one line in the program that said that machismo must be revolutionary, and we didn't see how machismo as a concept could ever be revolutionary. It's reactionary.
And therefore, we wanted that position changed. And the position was changed to say we want the equality of women and the equal participation of women on all levels. Eventually, 2 women were promoted to the Central Committee, and the organization became known for its positions on the women's struggle. It meant that the brothers had to learn to relate to women leaders. It meant that if there were abuses of women, the brothers could even be expelled for it, that they could be demoted for it. And a number of the leaders of the organization were disciplined for machismo and for oppressing women.
We also had to deal with the question of homosexuality. Before it became very chic, we had to acknowledge we had gay members. We had a gay caucus, and very early on we made alliances with Gay Liberation Front, Third World Gay Liberation, And the reason why we did that was because we felt that they were part of this, they were going along the same path we were.
We were talking about internal issues in our community that people didn't want to talk about. We wanted to talk about anti-black prejudices inside the Latino community.
So that it was very heavily stressed that people were from an Afro-Taino culture, because there was a lot of denial about there being any African roots in Puerto Ricans at all.
We started talking about that we had to root out these things of, pelo malo y pelo bueno. And that was where we really got into some serious, and that was where we saw that we then had to really, because how could we go around talking about that shit if we were still carrying some of that baggage?
In New York, the Young Lords continued to grow and directed their efforts to community health issues. They launched a lead poisoning detection program.
Ultimately, we found out that about a third of the children in East Harlem had high levels. And as a result of this program, legislation was passed here in New York City banning the use of lead-based paints in tenements, in apartment buildings. And also a law was put into effect that landlords would have to go back and take that lead paint out of the apartments, which has not been followed up on.
We have been doing TB testing throughout the community in the projects and in housing, in apartments, and what we found out was that there was a high percentage of people testing positive. The city at the time had this TB truck that it would park in very obscure places, and maybe they would see 20, 30, 40 people a day. We got into negotiations with the city of saying, why park it there? We have a location, we'll get the people that have tested positive the week before, because we would go out every Saturday and do the TB testing. Anyway, to no avail, they wanted to park their truck where they had been parking it, and they were not ready to budge from it. We planned an action, we took over the TB truck.
And we brought it into the community because though they were not servicing the community at that time, they were servicing other areas in the city.
That day, we had over 150 people taking x-rays. The technicians stayed there, and we're very pleased on how we dealt with the situation.
The Young Lords and the Health Revolutionary Unity Movement, a group of hospital workers and doctors, joined forces to organize for decent conditions. They targeted Lincoln Hospital, the sole facility available to the people of the South Bronx.
That building was condemned 25 years ago. Condemned because it was unsafe for human habitation. Condemned for rich people and opened up for poor people. That's what always happens.
The Young Lords took over Lincoln Hospital to address community health issues.
The politicians and the city administration had earmarked monies for a new hospital. It was taking 10 or 15 years. In the South Bronx at the time, in 1970, the statistics were something like 1 out of every 5 people were addicted to heroin.
We took over Lincoln Hospital. And the second time we took it over, we started a drug program called the Lincoln Detox.
We would see an average of 600 to 700 people a week at Lincoln Hospital for those first couple of years that we were doing that. We would put people on a 10-day detox.
In 1976, a new Lincoln Hospital was finally built in the South Bronx.
It was very exciting times in terms of opening up your mind and challenging orthodoxies and looking at new things. It was also a time of cultural change where people began wearing their hair natural and struggling against the European standards of beauty.
But it was a total community going through this experience. And there was a give and a take in terms of things that we would do that would then come out in music, for instance.
Artists like filmmakers and painters and photographers, writers, poets. The organization was open to all of that and embraced all of that. definitely what we were doing in the street was affecting what these artists were creating, and vice versa.
From the nervous breakdown street where the mice live like millionaires and the people do not live at all.
Yo quiero que mi Borinquen sea libre y soberana. Yo quiero que mi Borinquen sea libre y soberana.
One of the things that distinguished us was our constant insistence that the independence of Puerto Rico was a primary concern of Puerto Ricans in this country. Our button said, Tengo Puerto Rico en mi corazón. We always talked about independence. Our role models and people we saw as our leaders were the Nationalist Party of Puerto Rico.
Concretely, what that meant for us was that in all of our political undertaking, we sought to connect with the struggle for independence for Puerto Rico. We held a student conference where we organized students from all around the New York area and students from outside the New York area to come, and the specific purpose was to develop Free Puerto Rico Now committees on every campus.
It could not have been done had there not already existed a network of Puerto Rican clubs on campus. The Puerto Rican Student Union. Without that group, we couldn't have done this. And we got a sense of how strong the potential of them was when we had a demonstration at the United Nations calling for the independence of Puerto Rico, freedom of the Puerto Rican nationalists, and an end to police brutality in our communities.
At one point, we're coming up the hill, I think on Lexington Avenue, and the leadership of the organization is in the front row, and we look back, and it hits us. There's 10,000 people here, and Fee and I slapped 5, and we were like laughing. And, I mean, this was fun. This was terrific.
Yo quiero que mi Borinquen sea libre y soberana. Yo quiero que mi Borinquen sea libre y soberana. Porque la estrella de mi bandera no cabe en la americana.
As progressive movements gained popular support, the FBI and police increased repressive activities against them. They attacked many groups, including students, workers, civil rights activists, and the Black Panthers.
The FBI had put together a counterintelligence program, and that's where the acronym comes from, COINTELPRO, counterintelligence program, that was primarily aimed at stopping what Hoover defined as subversive elements in the African American movement. They would break into our apartments, and they didn't care about getting a court order for a wiretap. They just did it. And they had people who were able to, people who looked like us, who could infiltrate the organizations, We were infiltrated almost from the beginning.
COINTELPRO also specifically targeted the movement for the independence of Puerto Rico.
In the summer of 1970, Juan F. Ortiz and I flew down to Puerto Rico, and we see this guy. He says, well, I don't work for legal aid anymore. He says, I work for the U.S. Justice Department, and I've been assigned to follow you to Puerto Rico. And I want you to know that from the moment you get off the plane, there will be agents with you every step of the way when you are on the island.
In interoffice memos, the FBI instructed agents to create disruption and discord and exploit internal conflicts within the movement.
As soon as the young lords stepped into dealing with the issue directly of the independence of Puerto Rico, we were immediately subjected to a much stronger vigilance, much stronger investigation.
While undercover agents disrupted the organization from within, local police routinely harassed, arrested, and jailed young lords. One night, 2 young lords were arrested in El Barrio. While in police custody, Julio Roldan was found hung in his cell. Young Lords and community supporters led a procession through the streets protesting his death. 200 Young Lords and supporters occupied the First Spanish Methodist Church in East Harlem. They demanded an investigation into the prison system. In 1971, the prisoners in Attica rebelled.
People decided, after so many years of tolerating some of the discrimination and some of the brutalities that were going on in Attica, we decided to, take over the prison.
They presented a list of demands to officials and requested community observers to participate in negotiations.
We wanted representatives from the Young Lord Party to come. And this sort of raised eyebrows, within the prison administration, because they say, Young Lords, what is this? But Jose Paris came, and I think Fee came, and we sat down in what they call the negotiation table. And we negotiated. And the prison administrators refused to concede to our demands or our issues. At that point, they raided, literally raided the prison. They came in firing, Some people in the catwalk, they had a catwalk, got killed right there and then.
The final count left 39 persons dead and more than 89 injured.
The minute that the takeover occurred in Attica, we began doing support demonstrations throughout the city. And then the massacre took place, and we continued doing demonstrations and protests and demanding justice.
No official has ever been held accountable for the Attica massacre. Since early 1971, the Young Lords had been entangled in a debate about future direction. The Central Committee announced that the primary goal of the Young Lords Party was the independence of Puerto Rico and revealed plans to open branches on the island.
My gut feeling was that it wasn't going to work. And within the confines of the Central Committee, I fought the decision. There were other people on the Central Committee who felt differently. Some who had much closer roots or ties with Puerto Rico. Others that were sort of wavering and didn't know what to do.
Along those lines, it became, if you are Puerto Rican enough, you will go for this. And it was a way of browbeating the rest of us who disagreed. And this technique of browbeating into submission and to play upon your guilt was used successfully.
But I think an irreversible conflict had been opened up in the organization. I've been there a long time, but I think the two positions had really been opened up, and we would see them again later on.
On March 21st, 1971, Young Lords participated in a march in Puerto Rico and announced the move to the island.
We eventually started branches in Puerto Rico, and we started organizing in Santurce and Aguadilla.
The Young Lords faced many obstacles in Puerto Rico.
And the situation in Puerto Rico was very different, so the transportation was different and more difficult, and we needed to send money for that, and the selling of the newspaper was very different. There was a bilingual newspaper, but it dealt with the issues in the United States primarily, so that the newspaper wasn't the same kind of vehicle for raising money in Puerto Rico that it was here.
We did not know the experience in Puerto Rico. We went through a lot of emotional and psychological changes. Some of us couldn't even speak Spanish well.
After more than a year of work, the Puerto Rico Young Lords resigned from the organization, convinced that the role of the Young Lords was in the United States. The Central Committee accused them of factionalism.
One of the biggest mistakes, I think, that the Young Lords ever made was trying to think that just because we supported the independence of Puerto Rico, that we could figure out how to organize an independence movement on the island. Because the reality is that we were U.S. raised Puerto Ricans, and the experiences that we knew were the urban ghettos of the United States.
The move to Puerto Rico weakened the organization in the United States as offices started to close to shift resources to Puerto Rico.
And we started to lose the relationship with the community, which is what had kept us and made us strong. In closing down those offices, then people didn't have a place where they would come and talk to us about the police brutality issues. They didn't have a place where there could be a free breakfast program or a free clothing drive, and many of the things that had made us strong were no longer there.
The organization regrouped and took another direction. In July 1972, the Young Lords Party became the Puerto Rican Revolutionary Workers Organization under the leadership of Gloria Fontañez.
The push was mostly for doing work as close to the working class as possible. So that meant working in factories. So it meant organizational members being pulled out of either student work or work in public schools, with parents, to go into the factories and work closely with the workers.
But the group failed in its organizing efforts. More and more disillusioned members resigned, and the leadership retaliated against them. The violence turned inward, and one night, 2 leading members were kidnapped.
We were targeted, kept for 3 days, questioned, terrorized verbally, terrorized physically, terrorized by people in leadership who at one time I respected very much.
One thing that I knew, and I even as the beatings were going on, it was flashing in my mind, this is what happened to the Panthers. This is the shootout. This is the setup. Someone in here is a cop. And once we escaped, we talked about it. Now, there was no one we could trust. There was no one we could trust. Having been betrayed by people so close to us, we didn't believe there was anyone in the political movement that we could trust.
By 1976, the organization had faded into history. The organization was destroyed by police infiltration, by shifting political directions, and by infighting. People left one at a time until the organization came to an end. The Young Lords are remembered for promoting Puerto Rican history and pride, initiating Serve the People programs, and taking direct action to get response to Latino concerns.
Latino, Latino, abrázate a tu destino. En este mundo cruel.
Their activism inspired a generation who also took action for Latino empowerment. Many former Young Lords have continued to organize.
I'm a union organizer of 1199. We represent 100,000 healthcare workers. The Young Lords Party inspired me in fighting for social justice in the healthcare system.
I began to use my experience to work with others who co-founded El Puente and began to develop a place where young people and older people could come together and continue the movement.
In the early 1980s, we put all of the groups into an organization that still exists today called the National Congress for Puerto Rican Rights.
But the most dramatic action by former Young Lords was the call for the release of the Puerto Rican nationalists who had been in prison since the 1950s.
Many of us went off and got involved with the Committee to Free the Nationalist Political Prisoners. I had the opportunity of being among 27 people that took over the Statue of Liberty and put the Puerto Rican flag on its crown, claiming and demanding the release of the nationalist political prisoners. 9 months later, they get an executive clemency from Jimmy Carter.
Bueno, the release, the final release, was an incredible day. This was something that touched the heart of all Puerto Ricans that were there to greet them. Lolita was given the Puerto Rican flag that hung on the Statue of Liberty. So that was also quite an experience to see her get this flag, and then take it to Puerto Rico and put it at Don Pedro Albizu Campos' grave.
Today, Latinos continue to face economic, social, and political discrimination. And once again, Latino youth are organizing for social justice and human rights.
Pa'lante siempre, ponlo en tu mente. Pa'lante siempre, pa' mi gente. A quien no le gusta este tumbao, a quien entre que caben 100. What we about to bring is our Latin thing. Borinquen flavor with a little swing. Sazón con picante, pa'lante, siempre pa'lante. Like a gigante, New York giant, forced to be defiant. The Rican and years of discrimination have led us to establish a strong collaboration. Here's a demonstration with more elaboration. They took over a